Hi, it's been such a long time that I've done a video like this, I think actually last spring, but I'm back with a cooking and talking video. Today we are going to be making persimmon cake, these lovely fruit. So think of it as like a banana or like a pumpkin cake. It's perfect for the end of fall, which is the time that it is right now, even though it kind of also feels like, or it is, Christmas season. But here the leaves are still up, still yellow and orange and red. And I mean, khakis or persimmons are still in season, so I'm going to appreciate it while I can. And as always with these videos, I'm going to talk about movies that I've seen recently, or in this case, that I've seen over the past season, so fall, while I bake. I'll be following a recipe, but I'm also going to be adding quite a lot of things to the recipe. So if you want the original one, I'll have it linked below, and then just follow for the things that I add, which there won't really be measurements or anything like that, so kind of do as you want. The first thing we have to do is turn on the oven to 180 degrees Celsius or 350 Fahrenheit. And there's just going to be a nice little hum in the background, so sorry for that, but that's my oven for you. And next we're going to be peeling the persimmons. You really want like really ripe persimmons that are soft to the touch. These ones are a little bit small, so you want bigger ones, but that's why I have more persimmons than you would need for the cake if you were getting regular sized persimmons. And so I'm just cutting and peeling them and putting them into the bowl. With that, I can talk about my first movie, which I saw actually on Halloween. It's not a Halloween movie at all, but it's very stylish, and so it's, I think, a classic, not necessarily a Halloween movie, but Halloween costume movie, and that is Shampoo by Hal Ashby from 1975. It's kind of an ode to the 1960s. It takes place in 1968, and Warren Beatty, Goldie Hawn, and Julie Christie are all starring in the movie. It takes place on the day before and the day after and the day of the elections of 1968, which is of course when Nixon was elected. And it might seem like a very political movie at its forefront, which it is to a certain extent, but it's also not at all. Basically a day in the life movie of a very promiscuous hairdresser and what he gets up to. Well, the story itself is interesting. I think the thing that really is exciting about the movie is the fashion and the hair. I mean, it's about a hairstylist and the makeup. It's an incredible encapsulation of, I think, what everybody idealizes about the 1960s, especially 1960s LA. There's an amazing party scene that just, I don't know about you, but I would have loved to have been there if it was possible. Isn't it the most interesting, most amazing movie ever? No, not really. But I think what has kept it alive is just how amazing its style is. I wouldn't say it's not profound, because it definitely has its moments, and it's definitely more than meets the eye, I guess you could say. But definitely what the thing is about that movie is its style. So I quickly went off camera because it actually was a lot more intensive. There were seeds in my persimmons, which I've never seen before, so I couldn't really talk and focus on cutting and scooping at the same time. So I've put all the persimmons, or like the insides, into here, and now I'm gonna just smash that up a little bit with the 2 forks just to make sure that it's well combined. You can also use a blender or something like that, but I'm just too lazy to take mine out, so I'm just gonna do it the old-fashioned way, I guess you could say. So back to Shampoo. I think especially the female leads have amazing style in this movie. So Julia Christie and Goldie Hawn, their hair is a little ridiculous in some ways because it's this huge, almost bouffant-esque hair, but not really. It's all straight. or straight down, there's no buns, with these big iconic bangs. It's just like very, very specific to the movie, I guess you could say. But also the makeup is so cool. I remember a purple eyeshadow on Goldie Hawn, and just very cool, especially eye looks, which, I mean, I'm sure is also indicative of the time period, but it definitely comes to play in this movie. And I think that's definitely one of the best parts about it, is how, I mean, I don't know if you can say how loyal a lot of it is, maybe like a little bit of like a stereotype of what the 60s was like, if that's even possible, but it just really feels authentic to what we think of and what we look back on the 60s. And as I've said multiple times, the reason why this movie is good is the style, and it really, really serves. I must admit that even the men's clothing is pretty good. Warren Beatty is definitely more feminine than I think a lot of other lead actors are in movies, especially nowadays. And I really appreciate how much they go into his style as being like just as important as the women's style. It's a little bit more loyal to the times in the sense that it's not necessarily something that I think most guys would want to wear now, especially the ruffly sleeves and button downs. So matches like the intensity of the women's clothing that I think it's good. I could continue talking about the fashion of this movie all day long, and in fact I would like to, but I'll leave it up to you to see it to make your own judgment of how stylish it is. Okay, so now that we're pretty soft, let's move on to the next steps and the next movie. I am now going to melt some butter. I'm using vegan butter for this, but please use normal or whatever type of butter you want. This recipe isn't vegan, however, I'm sure you could make it. I've never really understood the vegan egg replacements, but that's definitely something you could do if you want to. The next movie that I want to talk about is actually a French movie, and I don't usually talk about French movies on this channel, partially because I just don't really know what's available to international audiences, so that kind of always sucks to give a recommendation and then nobody can actually watch it. The name of this movie that I want to talk about is called Chronique d'une liaison passagère, or Chronicles of a Fleeting Affair, by Emmanuel Mouret from this past year, so 2022. And Emmanuel Mouret has a habit of making movies that seem very French, I guess you could say. So about upper middle class men and women, usually Parisian, who basically have affairs. And I mean, sometimes it can feel like a little old school, if that makes sense. Like a very like 1960s or 70s or 20th century topic to talk about, and just how normalized it is, I guess you could say. But the thing that I like about his movies, and especially this one in particular, is how atypical they're still able to be. So this movie is about an affair between a married man and a single mother, and it really only centers on their affair, not their families outside of it, not really the friendships that they have outside of this affair either. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is to represent that it's so indicative or of like such a like huge part of their lives that that's the reason why we only see it, but it is clearly a part of that, and it is also just to really focus on their relationship and their relationship only, even though it isn't necessarily the best of circumstances. The butter needs to be melted, so I'm going to put it in the microwave for hopefully 10 seconds and we'll see how that goes. I actually did for 20 seconds. So we're just going in and we're stirring in. There's a twist at the end of this movie that I don't want to share because that kind of ruins the movie. But he doesn't rationalize affairs, and he doesn't necessarily say that they're positive, but he also doesn't say that they're negative either. And I like his approach of just more examining people's relationships as opposed to condoning or saying that they're just amazing. It's more complicated than that. I'm not saying that affairs are good, just that. But I think he has a really interesting way, the director, of encapsulating relationships that are a little, what's the word? A little risque, a little atypical, and showing what can happen to them in like a real world-esque situation. The acting is also really good in this movie. The two main actors are incredibly good in their roles. It's, of course, a movie that's about upper middle class people, as I mentioned earlier, so even the mise en scène is very typically Parisian chic. So I feel like if you're looking for a more modern French movie, one that kind of encapsulates modern France and modern Parisians, I don't mean in the sense of culturally this is exactly what's happening in terms of, everybody's this rich with this nice of apartments or doing exactly what these characters are doing. But I think it's a good lens into French cinema and French culture if you're looking for something more modern that is also a really good movie, both technically, storyline-wise, and just in general. So I've been slowly including all of the ingredients. I'm mixing and pouring and weighing. And to add a little bit of a late fall feeling, I'm also adding some cinnamon, nutmeg, and clover into the batter. We're going to add some walnuts at last minute to the batter, and then we're going to add some on top once it's in the pan. And now the batter goes into the pan to then be cooked. Okay, so the cake is in the pan, and as a little topper, I'm just going to add some walnuts into the top. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so I'm going to go and put this bad boy in the oven. It should cook for about 50 to 60 minutes. I'm going to clean up, and then we're going to talk about our last movie of the video. So the cake is in the oven, as you might be able to see. I've cleaned up, and now I want to talk about the last movie, which you've most likely already heard of. It's X by Ty West, which came out earlier this year. I think that a lot of people have been talking about its prequel more than the movie itself, Pearl, which came out, I think, either late summer or early autumn, and I haven't seen that movie, so I cannot comment on it, but I wanted to talk about X because I feel like just not that many people are talking about it, and I think it's a pretty successful horror movie. If you don't know the plot already, it's about a film crew that's creating an adult film in a remote area of Texas on a remote farm, and how they're suddenly being killed off by the owners of said farm. It stars Mia Goth, who's also in the prequel Pearl, and I think will also be in the sequel Maxine, and also Brittany Snow, Kit Cudi, and Jenna Ortega. I think that's a really well-mixed group of people, like some of whom were definitely a lot more popular maybe 10, 15 years ago in terms of acting, whereas others are more popular now. And I wouldn't necessarily say that that's a generational difference in terms of actors, but definitely they come from different backgrounds. Like, it's really funny to see Brittany Snow, who I've known in more of like teen or young adult movies, being put into a movie like this. And so it's a fun mix of actors who then play fun characters who, kind of play into stereotypes, but I feel like this movie is also a ode to B movies. However, it's slightly less raunchy and more serious than the B movies of the past. It's also like a good movie and technically well made and all of those things that do not exist in B movies. So the first half of the movie has a slower pace. It's more of a setup to everything that's happening. It's about the filmmaking part of the making of this adult film, and it really kind of goes more into the characters. I mean, nobody is a profound character in this movie. I do not mean to say that there's a lot of character development in this movie, but quite a bit of that happens in the first half, whereas the second half is a lot more fast-paced. It is when more things are happening, if that makes sense, and it's just a lot more dramatic. And so there's definitely things that are answered that were brought up maybe in the first half, so it's a good conclusion, but it definitely is a lot faster and a lot shorter amount of time as compared to the first half. Would I say that this is the best movie of the year? No, not at all. But I think it's a good movie to put on when it's a Saturday, Sunday afternoon, and you don't really know what else to watch and it's cold out. It has that very horror vibe, but still feels approachable at any time of the year. Even though the cake is still baking, I wanted to take this moment to thank you guys for watching. The sun goes down very early now as it's December, so I wanted to make sure that there was still a little bit of a semblance of natural light in this video as I'm saying goodbye. If you liked this video, then please like, comment, and subscribe down below. Thank you for watching, and I hope to bring more content like this, but also other content like this soon. And thanks. I'm of course going to show you what the cake looks like, so please stay tuned until the end of this video. Bye. And there she is! Oh my god, it smells so good in my apartment, especially when it was cooking. Cannot wait to dig in.